Hello students, welcome back to another session of EPG Padashala. I am Dr. Devaraj, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi. In this module, we are going to discuss the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda. The main objectives of these lessons are Neo-Vedanta philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, a brief biographical sketch of Swami Vivekananda and his spiritual humanism in his philosophy and his concept of universal religion and the different ways of realization according to Swami Vivekananda are discussed in detail. Before coming to the lesson, an introduction is given. In the 7th decade of 19th century, 4 great men were born in India, whose fame did not confine to India alone, but spread throughout all the corners of the world. They are Rabindranath Tagore, born in 1861, Vivekananda in 1863, Mahatma Gandhi in 1869, and Sri Aurobindo in 1872. These great personalities brought about a revolution in the social and political fields and also in the thoughts and ideas of the people of India. These thinkers had given their full attention to the problems of their age, sought rather and practical solutions to them to the Vedanta philosophy. Among these contemporary thinkers, Swami Vivekananda forms the link between the Renaissance and the modern period. He not only popularized Neo-Vedanta philosophy, but also developed it into a very strong and inspiring social philosophy which impressed every great man of his time as well as the general masses. Now we are going to discuss something about the biographical detail of Swami Vivekananda. He was born in Calcutta as the second son of Vishwanath Datta and Bhuvaneshwari Devi. His name was Narendranath. He showed his interest for a monastic life almost from his childhood days. While he was strongly inclined towards the development of the spiritual side, he was a great believer in reason, and from his early days, he sought to press this Vedantic vision and reality on all the ideas which he was told were based on infallible authority. Naren showed remarkable progress in his studies. At the age of 16, he became qualified to take collegiate education. He passed the first arts examination in 1881. In the same year, he met Sri Ramakrishna as a teacher of spirituality. He did a great deal to reconcile religion with reason in Naren's mind, which made him a great teacher of Vedantic wisdom. It was followed by many more meetings during the next years. It was the time that Naren studied Western logic, Western philosophy, and also read the philosophies of Herbert Spencer, Kant, Hume, Schopenhauer, Auguste Comte, and John Stuart Mill. These philosophers gave him the skepticism towards the authority and the faith in pure reason, which enabled him in later years to meet Western thinkers to their own ground. During this time, Naren came under the influence of Brahma Samaj and the protest against certain features of Orthodox Hindus such as polytheism, image worship, divine incarnation, etc. Later, he lost his enthusiasm, imbibed from Brahma Samaj, and became filled with doubts about the ultimate reality. For solving this problem, Naren went to Dakshineshwar and met Sri Ramakrishna again. This was the first step in his quest for God, which ultimately transformed into Swami Vivekananda. As a teacher of spirituality, Sri Ramakrishna did a great deal to reconcile religion with reason in Naren's mind and provide him the intellectual capital which made him such a great world teacher of Vedantic wisdom. Sri Ramakrishna died in 1886 and Naren had to take his place to fulfill the mission assigned to him. This is a photograph of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and his wife Sharada Devi. And now, deeply conscious of the mission he was to fulfill, Naren started on a pilgrimage without money or means to see the land and the people whom he was to serve. This led him all over India from the Himalayas to Kanyakumari and brought him into close contact with people in every walk of life. He was deeply moved by the distress and degeneration of the prevalent all around. Swami Vivekananda proceeded to Rameshwar and then to Kanyakumari, where he had his famous vision of One India. Having experienced the thrill of sharing the life of his fellow countrymen in its infinite variety, he sat on the last stone at the southern tip, since then known as the Vivekananda Rock, and meditated for hours. This is the photograph of Vivekananda Rock at Kanyakumari. Now it is a tourist place. Naren now set forth a spiritual conquest, assuming the name of Vivekananda, the name suggested by Maharaja of Khetri, who had been profoundly impressed by the Swami's discretion. It was at this time he heard about the Parliament of Religions to be held at Chicago on 11th September 1893 and decided to go there. Almost all world religions were represented and their respective leaders had arrived fully prepared to establish their own credentials and supremacy of the faith and beliefs. See, this is a photograph of the famous Chicago address, which was in 1893, September 11. The providential appearance of Swami Vivekananda opened the closed mind of the audience to the glorious responsibility of a harmony of religions and not the exclusive superiority of any one. This famous Chicago address enshrined the essence of his message to the world. After Chicago address, he traveled extensively in America and in England and came into close contact with the people over there. England gave him some of his famous disciples, the foremost being his Miss Margaret Noble, later called as Sister Nivedita. And in New York, he had a stenographer named J.J. Goodwin, who turns out to be the ardent disciple of Swami Vivekananda, who was the stenographer of Swami Vivekananda, who dictated many of his lectures and talks. In 1897, he and his followers founded an organization called Sri Ramakrishna Mission and also established 2 journals to spread the message of Neo-Vedantism, Prabuddha Bharata in English and also Udbodhan in Bengali language. And finally, on 4 July 1902, he quietly passed away at an early age of 39 at Belur Mutt. Here is a photograph of the famous Belur Mutt, which is in Calcutta. And this is the room in which Swami Vivekananda spent his last days at Belur. We already discussed something about the biographical details of Swami Vivekananda. Now we slowly move to the core philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, which is popularly known as Neo-Vedantism. Thoughts of Vedanta are thousands of years old, but they were organized into a philosophical system for the first time by Shankaracharya in the 8th century. Later, dualistic systems of Ramanuja and Madhva were also confined to scholars. They were not related to the life of common man. It was Swami Vivekananda who first brought the message of Vedanta to the common people in modern times, presenting its essential features in a simple way and working out the means to apply this to our daily life. He followed the Vedantic philosophy in different form in the spiritual life and the natural morality and ethics. Swamiji realized that the crises of India were due to the decline of the Vedic wisdom or Vedic religion. So he made his mind to re-establish the Vedic and Upanishadic tradition in such a way that it proved itself to be truly relevant in modern times. His philosophy may be called Neo-Vedanta, which was scientific, humanistic, universalistic, and also in tune with the demands of our modern times. And this new reconstruction of Indian philosophy was an attempt to reinterpret the doctrine of Advaita Vedanta as an answer to the life crucial problems. Performing the work in the spirit of worship was the cornerstone of the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda. To him, there was no difference between service of man and the worship of God, between true righteousness and spirituality. Thus, Swami Vivekananda taught us how to equate work with worship and service to man with service to God. Swami Vivekananda gave to the West the wonderful gift of Vedanta with its message of human divinity and the oneness of humanity and of the true religion. As distinguished from the traditional Advaita Vedanta of Shankara, it is a synthetic Vedanta which reconciles Dvaita or dualism, Advaita or non-dualism, and also other theories of reality. In this sense, it may also be called concrete monism, insofar as it holds that Brahman both Saguna and Nirguna. Hence, it is said that Neo-Vedantism is a re-establishment, restatement, reconstruction, re-evaluation and reinterpretation of Advaita Vedanta of Shankara with modern arguments in modern languages suited to modern situations itself with modern challenges. This is the essence of the Neo-Vedantism of Swami Vivekananda. And now we will come to another important aspect of Vivekananda, which is known as spiritual humanism of Swami Vivekananda. The practical teaching of Swami Vivekananda are predominantly humanistic and intensely activistic and dynamic. This humanism, which is founded in the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, is often called as spiritual humanism. His humanism is derived from the idea of Adhyatma Vidya, or the science of spiritual possibilities. It recommends the stress of humanitarian work and the service of humanity. It advocates the identity of humanity with divinity. And according to Swami Vivekananda, service of man is to be regarded as service to God. It is clear in his utterance that each soul is potentially divine and the aim is to realize the divinity. It defends the purity of human nature, regard man as God, attacks social, economic, religious evils in the society, and inculcates faith and strength in the man. Swami Vivekananda developed the idea of Daridra Narayana, which means to see God in the poor, ignorant, and the weak. Service of humanity, as by realizing the divinity, is the postulate of spiritual humanism. The practical outcome of spiritual humanism may be summed up the ideals of social service, dignity, and the ideal of unity of religion and the gospel of love. Though the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda is highly spiritualistic or idealistic, he is not against the material development of the country. He believed that scientific and technological development are essential for the regeneration of India. As a humanist, he is highly concerned about the poor people and the downtrodden. They need special care and attention. Here we see the basic difference of traditional Advaita and the modern Advaita, which is known as Neo-Vedantism. In the traditional Advaita philosophy of Shankara, he is least concerned about the empirical reality. His main task is to define the absolute reality and try to realize this absolute reality in ourselves. But in the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, we find that the social reality is accepted and the aim of life is to realize the divinity, and after the realization, the realized person continue to serve in the society in order to help the entire people. This is the basic difference of the traditional Advaita and the modern Neo-Vedantism of Swami Vivekananda. And another important factor of his humanism is that he is against the concept of sin, which is very clearly seen in the religion of Christianity. And there is, in the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, there is no place for weakness. In his thought, he wanted strong, positive, energetic thought. The humanism of Swami Vivekananda defends the purity of human nature, regarded man as God. And the practical outcome of the spiritual humanism of Swami Vivekananda may be summed up in the ideal of social service, divinity of man, the ideal of universal religion, and the gospel of love. It described that each soul is the manifestation of Brahman and is divine. Man possesses in himself infinite power because of this divine nature in each individual being. This is the postulate of the spiritualistic humanism of Swami Vivekananda. This will help us to understand the dignity of man. It brings us to the feeling of oneness of existence in the society. A peaceful and a loving relationship between man and man can be established by this spiritual humanism. The spiritual humanism of Swami Vivekananda can be traced from the Ishavasya Upanishad, in the opening verse of the Ishavasya Upanishad. In the opening verse of Ishavasya Upanishad very clearly state that Ishavasya idam sarvam yatkindya jagatyam jagat tene tektena bunjida magridam kasya vidadana. And with this, we are moving to the next important aspect of the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, which is known as the universal religion of Swami Vivekananda. The important aspect of universal religion of Swami Vivekananda is that the religion of Swami Vivekananda is based on the extract of the different religious truth, freed from dogmas, sacraments, rites, and ceremonies. According to him, Vedanta alone could become the basis of universal religion, as it embraces all human beings from the lowest to the highest. A universal religion, if really universal, must satisfy at least two conditions. First, it must open its gates to every individual. It must admit that nobody is born with this or that religion. Whether he takes to one religion or the other must ultimately be left to his inner likes and choice. In this sense, by individualizing religion, we really universalize it. Secondly, a really universal religion must be able to give satisfaction and comfort to every religious sects. The universal religion has to supersede the conflict of these sects and therefore must be satisfying and reasonable to them. Vivekananda says that a simple insight to the nature of different religions will show that they are not actually contradictory to each other. They are in fact supplementary to each other. The truth of religion is so comprehensive that different religions concentrate only one aspect or on a few aspects of a religion. Each religion takes up an aspect of religion and develops it. Therefore, every religion is adding to the rich variety that religion is capable of generating, and it is also adding to the development of religions as its own way. Swami Vivekananda wishes to make it clear that there may be contradictory points of view of the same thing. If we take a photograph of the same object from the different angles, no two photographs will be alike. They may even give opposite impressions, but they are photographs of the same objects. Likewise, we view truth in our own ways, color them from our own peculiar ways of understanding and grasping. This will make a difference between man and man, and this explains the contradictory character of the different views. But all they are basically of the same reality and hence supplementary to each other. Thus, the universal religion already exists. It exists there, although some of us are not aware of it. Different religions emphasize different qualities of religion, and as such, it is not possible to find the common elements. Islam, for example, lays emphasis on universal brotherhood, Hinduism on spirituality, Christianity on self-purification for entering into the kingdom of God. It is difficult to compare these, and therefore the tenets of universal religion could not be the common character of the different religions. By universal religion, Vivekananda does not mean a religion that will have one universal philosophy or one universal mythology or one universal ritual. They may all differ from sect to sect or even from individual to individual, and yet universal religion is there. The one watchword for universal religion according to Swami Vivekananda is acceptance. Here acceptance is not just a toleration. Toleration is a negative in its import. It implies at least at times that something is being allowed in spite of being wrong. Vivekananda recommends positive acceptance. Another characteristic of religion, universal religion, is that it has to be acceptable to all minds. It has to satisfy the largest possible proportion of mankind, and it must be able to supply food to all the various types of mind. Therefore, Vivekananda says that the universal religion must harmoniously balance all the aspects of religion, namely philosophy, emotion, work, and mysticism. Social service, compassion, feeling of oneness are the chief characteristics of the universal religion. There are lessons which Vivekananda taught us in his great life. These lessons have purpose, a validity, and a relevance today. In this lesson, we find that Vivekananda is very systematically developed the concept of universal religion. Now we will slowly move on to the next topic, that the ways of realization. The realization is the aim of each and every school of Indian philosophy, and in his philosophy, Vivekananda also developed the different paths for the realization. According to Vivekananda, the process of realization by which soul realizes immortality is yoga. Yoga has double meaning. In the classical period, yoga in the philosophy of Sankhya, we can see yoga is disunion. The disunion of the Purusha from the clutches of Prakriti. Here in the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda, yoga has a different connotation. Here yoga means union. Union of the individual soul, the absolute self. According to Swami Vivekananda, there are 4 yogas, namely Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raj Yoga. Realization attained through the discriminating knowledge like self-knowledge, knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of unity of everything is called as Jnana Yoga. And Vivekananda says that renunciation is a necessary stage in the practice of Jnana Yoga. Renunciation demands getting rid of all selfishness and of the controlling of body and the mind and the senses. This is called Vairagya. But according to Vivekananda, there is a positive side of renunciation also, and it is the longing to know the Brahman. This positive aspect for knowledge is the essential condition of renunciation. And renunciation is a precondition of Jnana Yoga. Now we will move to the Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is the way of pure love in which the object of love or devotion is not finite or the limited, but the supreme. This love will a universal love. Vivekananda determines the steps through which Bhakti Yoga progresses towards the realization of the Supreme. External worship, prayer, repeating God's name, meditation are all the stages of Bhakti through which the devotee attains realization in feeling of the oneness of everyone. And Vivekananda says that this way is the most convenient and the most popular of all other ways. It is natural to man, and does not require any special aptitude or capacity or resources which otherwise require. That is why this appears to be the easiest method of realization. A continuous doing of work, constant practice of non-attachment in all actions of life enables a man to rise above his self and to have a feeling of oneness with everything. Through selfless work, one's mind becomes pure and he is able to identify himself with all. This is the realization of immortality or Karma Yoga. Vivekananda seems to be very much impressed by the Gita ideal of Nishkama Karma. The secret of action is that one must not expect anything in return of the action done. He says, he works best who works without any motive, neither for money, nor for fame, nor anything else. And when a man can do that, he will be a Buddha. And out of him, will come the power to work in such a manner as will transform the world, and this man represents the very highest ideal of Karma Yoga. And the last one is Raja Yoga. According to Vivekananda, Raja Yoga is the way to realization of immortality by controlling the mind and the body. It is a way of physical and mental discipline. Vivekananda is aware that this method is not for the weak, as it requires immense faith in oneself and also physical and mental strength. It gradually enables the yogi to acquire certain excellences and powers, and finally the yogi is able to practice complete concentration, leading to the realization of the unity with divinity. Although Vivekananda describes these four different ways, he says that they are different ways for the realization of the same goal. Therefore, he feels that one can choose the path as he likes. If one follows any one of these paths with sincerity and earnestness, he will be able to reach the goal. The only thing is that there must be a very strong and intense sincerity and a sense of purpose. Here is a photograph of Sister Nivedita, who was a close associate of Swami Vivekananda. And here is a photograph of Swami Vivekananda at Chicago address in 1893, September 11. Swami Vivekananda is one of the greatest exponent of Vedanta philosophy in the modern period. Is a revolutionary saint who remolded the traditional Vedanta in a modern context. According to Swami Vivekananda, Vedanta is the right way of life, and it is experienced by anybody else at anywhere at any time. And in his entire philosophy can summarized in few principles, that each and every soul is potentially divine, and the aim of life is to realize the divinity, and the realization of that all the religion in the universe is preach the same truth and leads us to the same destination. Hope this session is enjoyed by all. Thank you.